So let's jump right in. Let's start with suicide. Many of us in this field have had professional and possibly personal experience with suicide. We know what it feels like to sit in a room with somebody who is on that brink. And those of you that haven't experienced that yet, you will. It's part and parcel of being in this field. That's why we take suicide trainings. People who are suffering, many of them eventually are going to reach a point where they do ask the question whether they should stay alive or not. That energy feels very different in the room. I want to help you today understand the difference between that energy and the energy of a non-suicidal self-injurer. In the case of suicide, our clients have done some math, and the math that they've done is pretty scary. They've reached a point in their lives where they're looking around. In their minds, they're seeing and calculating the amount of damage that they've caused to their loved ones, the burdensome nuisance that they've become to those around them. The math that they've done is grim and it's scary. What they've realized in a very matter-of-fact way is that this world would be a lot better off without them. Hollywood movies want us to think that what suicide looks like is dissolving in a puddle of tears and screaming and crying out, "I can't do this anymore." But those of us who have sat with it know that that's not what it looks like at all. Someone who has reached the point of considering suicide is calm. They're actually unemotional. There's a chill in the air. As a clinician, you feel very, very far away from them. They've reached a point of resignation. They've realized, at least in their own minds, that this answer makes the most sense. I teach my students and my associates that in those situations, clinicians stop doing therapy. In those situations, clinicians become rescue workers. In those situations, your top priority is making contact, trying to reach them. That's what all your suicide trainings are for. In the case of non-suicidal self-injury, you have a very, very different energy. One of the first things that I tell parents and teachers is that a good way to think about non-suicidal self-injury is that it's coping. And then I say this very controversial thing. I say if you can think of non-suicidal self-injury as a means of coping with something, then as long as we're coping, we're on the right track. And you have to hear what I'm saying there. I'm suggesting as long as we're cutting, as long as we're burning, as long as we're carving, as long as we're doing any of the self-injurious activities, we're actually better off than when we're considering suicide. And you see, non-suicidal self-injury is a way that somebody's figured out to get through the pain. It's actually a statement of survival. Somebody who's cutting without suicidal intent has plans to survive this moment and get to the next one. And maybe you don't like the way that they're coping. Maybe the way that they're coping is in fact pretty gory. But the truth of the matter is that these are fighters. I said before, this is a very special group. These are soldiers. These are the ones who actually want to make it. They don't like what's going on around them. They're triggered by X, Y, and Z. They've had relationship failures all over the place. But at the end of the day, they're interested in living. That's why they're cutting. This part is tricky for a clinician, because how do you know the difference? Let's say that all you know at some point is that a teenage girl has cut her arm open. Now, how do you know if it was non-suicidal or suicidal? The simplest answer I can give you is to trust your client on this one. I can tell you from 16 years of experience that a non-suicidal self-injurer will tell you, in fact, they will insist that they had no intention to die. Believe them. Trust them. They're telling you the truth. A less simple way of trying to distinguish whether someone is suicidal or non-suicidal is in their response to their own injury. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Most non-suicidal self-harmers have some kind of ritual that is around the healing of the wound. They have kits, usually, kits that they keep in their bathroom drawer or under their mattress. And inside of their kit, sure, is their instrument for cutting. They might have a blade or some scissors or a piece of glass in there. But if you ever had the privilege of looking inside of that kit, what you would find in there, in addition to the blade, would be gauze and neosporin and Band-Aids and hydrogen peroxide. I know that it sounds strange to you probably, but it's actually part of the episode. It's part of the ritual for a lot of cutters, is that once the wound is inflicted, once the pain is felt, once they feel better, now they go into the healing part of it. I get a lot of questions about, what if they cut too deep? Isn't it possible that they could accidentally kill themselves? And I have to tell you, I feel strongly, no. They're not going to accidentally kill themselves, and I have no research to back that up. No one has ever counted the number of accidental deaths by non-suicidal self-injury, because I hate to be glib, but you can't ask them when they're dead. Here's what I'm basing my strong opinion on. In all of my years of working with this population, I have lost count of how many of my non-suicidal self-injurers have called 911 or woken up mom or dad or emergency texted a boyfriend or a girlfriend, "Oh no, I cut too deep, I need help." I'm telling you that because of all of those experiences, yes, anecdotal, that's a way to know that they're not suicidal. If they cut too deep and they start to worry about all the blood they're seeing, or they burn too much and start worrying about something like infection, this is the group that's going to do something about it. They're going to call 911. They're going to wake up a parent. They're going to call you. They're going to be panicked because they don't want to die. It's in their panic. It's in their response to the injury itself that you can distinguish whether this is suicidal intent or not. So as frank and direct as this may sound, I would encourage you, if after trying these different assessment methods, you're still not quite sure, go ahead and ask your client what they would do if they ever cut too deep, and listen to what they say. Worry about the ones that seem indifferent. Worry about the ones that say they'd probably just let it bleed. That's probably indicating more of a suicidal ideation. Don't worry about the ones that say, "Oh, I know how to cut," or "I know which part of my body bleeds," or "I think I'd probably call you." That's a good way to determine it. If you think of non-suicidal self-injury as a coping mechanism, well then coping is good. When your client stops coping, you're hoping that they've stopped coping because the problem is starting to get solved. Whatever they're coping with is being resolved. What I tell clinicians is, you need to start worrying about suicide when your client has stopped cutting, stopped burning, and the problem is not being resolved. Because then we're worried that they've moved into the suicidal ideation realm. Then we start worrying about that scary math that they do. That everything they're trying, even something so counterintuitive, something so dramatic as inflicting a wound on their own bodies, isn't helping them. When they start doing that scary math, now we worry. It's when they stop cutting, and they shouldn't, that you start worrying about suicidal ideation.